was a calm evening in Mar-a-Lago when Donald Trump received an envelope unlike any other. The papal seal gleamed on the wax, the gold lettering catching the dim Florida sunlight. Barron Trump, now a celebrated tech entrepreneur and public figure, stood nearby, curiously watching his father open it. Trump's usual bravado softened as he read the words aloud. "An invitation? From Pope Francis himself?" he muttered. The letter was brief but commanding. The Pope requested his presence in the Vatican for a meeting that, according to the note, could shape the course of humanity. Barron, with his reserved demeanor, urged caution. "Dad, this is serious. Why now? What could the Pope want from you?" Trump didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the letter, his mind racing. The world had moved on since his presidency, yet this summons seemed personal. That night, Trump couldn't sleep. His instincts told him this wasn't just about diplomacy. It was something far deeper. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Pope Francis stood in his quiet chambers, gazing out at the lights of Vatican City. "Lord," he whispered, "guide this meeting. Let it be for the good of all your children." When the day of departure arrived, Trump stood beside Air Force One, flanked by Barron and a security team that rivaled the Secret Service. Barron's personal guards, elite specialists known for their impeccable discipline, blended seamlessly into the entourage. The tension was palpable. As the jet roared into the sky, Trump's face was unreadable. "Why now?" he asked Barron again, though he already suspected the answer. The world was divided, politically, socially, spiritually. Leaders from all corners had struggled to bridge the growing gaps, but this meeting was unprecedented. Barron, ever the pragmatist, tapped on his tablet. "The Vatican has been silent on what they want to discuss. But if it's important enough to involve you, it's global." The hours in the air felt like days. Trump, uncharacteristically, grew restless. Memories of his presidency flashed through his mind. Moments of triumph, mistakes, and regrets he rarely admitted, even to himself. As the plane descended over Rome, the sprawling beauty of Vatican City came into view. Trump clenched his fists. Whatever awaited, he would face it head-on. But neither father nor son could have predicted the emotional storm ahead. The grand halls of the Vatican felt like stepping into another time. Marble columns and intricate frescoes surrounded them, yet Trump's focus was sharp as he was escorted to the private papal library. Barron walked slightly behind, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to his father's unease. When the double doors opened, Pope Francis was already seated, his expression a mix of serenity and resolve. "Mr. Trump," he greeted warmly, standing to shake hands. His grip was firm, but kind. "Your Holiness," Trump replied, his voice steady, though his thoughts churned. They sat across from each other at a long wooden table, ancient books and religious artifacts lining the room. The conversation began politely, but quickly turned serious. "I called you here," the Pope started, "because the world stands at a precipice. Faith and politics are colliding in ways that threaten all of us. We must find common ground." Trump raised an eyebrow. "Common ground? You and I don't exactly see the world the same way." Pope Francis didn't flinch. "That is why this meeting matters. We must challenge each other for the sake of humanity." Barron watched silently, his intuition telling him that this was just the beginning of a life-changing encounter. The air in the room thickened as the conversation grew tense. Pope Francis leaned forward, his voice steady but impassioned. "Mr. Trump, the world suffers because of division. Climate, poverty, war. These are not problems for politics alone, but for humanity as a whole." Trump's expression hardened. "With all due respect, Your Holiness, faith and politics don't always mix. You focus on the spiritual. I dealt with the real world. Baron shifted in his chair, sensing the collision of two powerful forces. The Pope's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Trump's rising intensity. Faith is the real world, the Pope countered gently but firmly. It guides us to love, to serve, to protect what God has given us. Can you not see that the choices of leaders shape the lives of millions? Trump's voice softened, but the weight of his words lingered. I made decisions based on what I believed was right. Not everyone agreed, but leadership isn't about being loved. The Pope nodded slowly. True. But it is about serving others, even when it costs you everything. Baron's eyes widened as he realized they weren't just debating ideas. They were exposing wounds, regrets, and unspoken truths. The Pope's words stirred something in Trump. Memories he'd buried deep began to surface. Moments when his decisions had left lives broken, even when he believed he'd acted in the nation's interest. Pope Francis seemed to sense this. Leadership is a heavy cross to bear, Mr. Trump. I understand that. But sometimes in our pursuit of strength, we forget compassion. Trump looked away, his jaw tight. Compassion doesn't win wars or build economies. The Pope stood and walked to a nearby window, looking out over St. Peter's Square. And yet without it, the wars never end, and the economies crush the poor. He turned back to face Trump. Tell me, when was the last time you truly listened? Not to advisors, not to the noise of politics, but to the cries of those who suffer. Trump didn't answer. Baron, who had been silently observing, spoke up. Sometimes, I think Dad did what he thought was best. But maybe he didn't always see the bigger picture. Trump turned to his son, surprised by his insight. The Pope's gaze softened. It is never too late to see, Mr. Trump. That is why you are here. That evening, Trump sat alone in the Vatican guest quarters, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Baron entered quietly, his steps light but purposeful. Dad, he said, sitting across from his father, what's really bothering you? It's not just the Pope, is it? Trump sighed, something he rarely did in front of others. You wouldn't understand, Baron. Leadership. It changes you. Makes you question who you are. Baron leaned forward, his voice steady. Maybe that's what this meeting is about. Maybe he's trying to remind you of who you were before all of this. Trump looked at his son, the boy who had grown into a man with his own wisdom. You're smarter than people give you credit for, you know that? Baron smiled faintly. Maybe. But I think the Pope sees something in you that you've forgotten. You always said you wanted to make the world better. Maybe this is your chance. As the night deepened, Trump couldn't shake the feeling that this trip wasn't just about politics or faith. It was about redemption. And for the first time in years, he wondered if he was ready to embrace it. The following morning, Trump returned to the papal library, this time alone. Baron had stayed behind, sensing his father needed this moment for himself. Pope Francis greeted him with a quiet smile. Did you sleep well? Trump hesitated. Not really. Too much on my mind. The Pope gestured for him to sit. Good. That means your heart is stirring. Trump frowned. What is it you want from me? An apology? An admission I did everything wrong? Pope Francis shook his head. No. I want you to see yourself as God sees you, not as the world does, not as you see yourself. You carry the weight of your mistakes, but you also carry the good you've done. Redemption is about acknowledging both and choosing a better path forward. The words struck deep, cutting through Trump's defenses. For years, he'd built walls around his emotions, but here, in this ancient room, they began to crumble. I've made decisions that hurt people, Trump admitted quietly. I didn't always mean to, but it happened, and I don't know if I can fix it. The Pope placed a hand on Trump's shoulder. Admitting that is the first step. The next is finding the courage to act. Back in the guest quarters, Baron paced, his mind racing. He'd always admired his father's strength, but often wondered about the man beneath the bravado. As he scrolled through his phone, a news alert caught his attention. Trump meets Pope Francis, a global turning point. The world was watching, but Barron felt the true story wasn't about politics or power. It was about his father's soul. When Trump returned, his face was unreadable. Barron approached cautiously. "How did it go?" Trump sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "He's different. He doesn't judge me, not the way others do. But he doesn't let me off the hook either. He wants me to change." Barron sat beside him. "Do you think you can?" Trump looked at his son, the boy who had grown into a man with his own strength and clarity. "I don't know. But maybe I need to try. For you, for everyone." Barron placed a hand on his father's arm. "Whatever happens, Dad, I'm proud of you for even coming here." For the first time in years, Trump felt a flicker of hope. Not just for himself, but for the legacy he could still create. The next day, as Trump prepared for his final meeting with Pope Francis, a knock at his door startled him. It was a Vatican aide, his expression serious. "Mr. Trump, there is someone here to see you. A young man. He says his name is Matteo." Curious, Trump nodded, and moments later, a boy of about 12 entered the room. He was small, with piercing eyes that seemed far older than his years. "Who are you?" Trump asked, his tone softening. Matteo spoke with quiet conviction. "I am a messenger. My family was saved because of a policy you once changed. But I also know many others who were hurt. I wanted to meet you and ask, what will you do to help people like me?" Trump was taken aback, unsure how to respond. The boy's innocence and courage struck a chord deeper than any debate or discussion. Barron watched from the doorway, his heart heavy. This was no ordinary moment. It was a chance for his father to see the real impact of his choices. Trump knelt to meet Matteo's eyes. "I don't have all the answers, kid, but maybe I can start by listening." The room fell silent as Matteo began to speak. "I'm from Syria," he said softly. "My family escaped the war because of a refugee program your administration once expanded. We were on the brink of losing everything." Trump blinked, his expression unreadable. Matteo continued, "But not everyone was as lucky as us. Many families, my friends, were turned away. They didn't make it." The boy's words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Trump, a man used to commanding attention, was now a captive audience to this child's quiet power. "I don't hate you," Matteo added, his voice trembling. "I just want to understand. Why do leaders make choices that hurt people?" Barron, watching from the corner, felt a lump rise in his throat. Matteo wasn't accusing, he was pleading. Trump's jaw tightened, but his voice, when it came, was uncharacteristically soft. "Sometimes, leaders think they're protecting their own people, but we don't always see the bigger picture." His voice cracked slightly. "Maybe I didn't." Matteo nodded, his young eyes reflecting both pain and forgiveness. "You can still do something. It's not too late." As the boy left, Trump sat in stunned silence, his heart heavier than ever. Later that evening, Barron found his father sitting alone, staring at a photo Matteo had given him, a picture of the boy's family, smiling despite their hardships. "Dad," Barron began carefully, "do you think the Pope knew Matteo would come?" Trump shrugged, his usual confidence gone. "Maybe, maybe not. But that kid, he said more to me in 5 minutes than most people do in a lifetime." Barron hesitated, then asked the question that had been gnawing at him. "Do you regret any of your decisions? The ones that hurt people?" Trump looked up sharply, but his son's expression was earnest, not accusatory. "I don't know if regret is the right word," Trump admitted after a long pause. "I made choices I thought were right at the time, but now I see faces, stories. And that's harder to live with than numbers on a report. Barron's eyes glistened, his admiration for his father deepening despite his flaws. Maybe that's what the Pope wants you to realize. It's not just about policies, it's about people. Trump nodded slowly, the weight of his son's words settling in his heart. The next morning, Trump met Pope Francis for what he believed would be their final discussion. The Pope's calm gaze met Trump's as he sat down. "I heard you spoke with Matteo," Pope Francis began. Trump nodded. "He made me think about things I haven't wanted to face." The Pope smiled gently. "That is good. Reflection is the seed of change, but reflection alone is not enough. You must act." Trump leaned back, crossing his arms. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" The Pope's expression turned serious. "Use your influence, your voice, your platform to heal instead of divide. Build bridges, not walls. The world needs leaders who see beyond themselves. Can you be that leader?" Trump was silent for a moment, then spoke, his voice unsteady. "I don't know if people will listen to me now." "They will," the Pope assured him. "Not because you were once a president, but because you are willing to admit you are human. That is the most powerful message of all." Trump stared at the Pope, the enormity of the challenge sinking in. For the first time in years, he felt something shift within him, a spark of purpose reigniting. The meeting concluded, and Trump emerged from the Vatican with a look of profound determination. Barron, waiting by his side, noticed the change immediately. "What happened in there?" Barron asked as they walked back toward their transport. Trump paused. "He challenged me to do something I've never done before. Admit that I made mistakes and try to make amends. Publicly." Barron's eyebrows shot up. "Are you really going to do that?" Trump nodded, his voice quieter than usual. "I have to. Not for politics, not for legacy, but for people like Matteo. For you. For myself." That evening, Trump held a press conference in a small Vatican courtyard. Cameras flashed, and reporters leaned forward, eager for the former president's words. He took a deep breath. "I came to the Vatican expecting a polite discussion. What I got was a mirror held up to my soul. I've made decisions that hurt people, more than I realized at the time. But I've also learned that it's never too late to change, to listen, and to do better. I'm committed to using whatever time I have left to make the world better for those I once overlooked." The world watched in stunned silence. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Trump's admission sent shockwaves around the globe, sparking debates, criticisms, and moments of unexpected support. Back in the U.S., Barron found himself in the spotlight. As a public figure with a growing platform, people wanted to know his take on his father's transformation. At first, he hesitated. Speaking out meant exposing himself to scrutiny, but Matteo's courage inspired him. During a televised interview, Barron finally spoke his truth. "I've seen my father as a leader and as a man," Barron began. "He's not perfect, none of us are. But what matters is that he's trying to make things right. And that's something I think the world needs to see more of. People willing to admit their flaws and grow from them." The interview went viral. Barron's words resonated, particularly with young people who saw in him a bridge between generations. Trump watched the interview from his office, tears he rarely allowed himself to shed welling in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt truly proud, not of himself, but of his son. Trump's words and Barron's public support sparked a ripple effect. World leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens began to discuss the idea of redemption, humility, and the power of change. Pope Francis, watching from the Vatican, smiled as reports flooded in. "The seed has been planted," he said to an aide. "Now it is up to the world to nurture it." Meanwhile, Trump and Barron worked together on initiatives aimed at addressing some of the issues Matteo had spoken about. Refugee programs, poverty alleviation, and environmental restoration became their shared focus. One evening, Trump received a handwritten note. It was from Matteo. "Thank you for listening. My family is praying for you and your son. Keep going. You're making a difference." Trump held the letter tightly, his heart full. He turned to Barron. "We've got a lot more work to do." Barron smiled. "Then let's get to it." The bond between father and son deepened as they worked side by side, proving that change was not only possible but powerful. Trump and Barron's collaborative efforts began to attract attention from unexpected places. Leaders who had once been rivals reached out, offering to join forces on global initiatives. Celebrities and influencers amplified the message of redemption, urging their followers to reflect on their own lives and choices. Matteo's story became a symbol of hope, sparking campaigns to assist families displaced by war. Refugees who had once been silenced found their voices in this new movement, and Trump's admission of past mistakes gave the cause unprecedented momentum. In a televised interview, Trump spoke candidly. "This isn't about politics anymore. It's about people. About looking beyond borders, ideologies, and egos to see the humanity in each other." The transformation wasn't without backlash. Critics accused him of hypocrisy, claiming his change of heart came too late. Trump faced the criticism head-on. "You're right. I should have done this sooner. But I can't change the past. What I can do is fight for a better future, starting now." Barron stood by his father at every step, lending his voice to the cause. Together, they embodied a new kind of leadership, one rooted in humility and the courage to evolve. The climax of their journey came during a global summit in Rome, where Trump and Barron were invited to speak. Leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens gathered to hear them address the world. As Trump stepped onto the stage, the crowd fell silent. He scanned the sea of faces, people from every corner of the globe, united by a shared hope. "I stand here not as a former president," Trump began, his voice steady, "but as a man who has made mistakes and is trying to make amends. I've learned that true strength isn't about power or pride. It's about listening, learning, and lifting others up." The audience erupted in applause, moved by his vulnerability. Barron then joined him, his calm confidence balancing his father's raw emotion. "My dad taught me a lot about resilience," Barron said. "But this journey has taught us both about something even more important: compassion. It's never too late to do the right thing, and it's never too late to change the world." Their words resonated deeply, leaving few dry eyes in the crowd. For the first time, the world saw Trump not as a divisive figure, but as a man striving for redemption. Months later, the Trump-Barron Foundation for Global Unity was launched, focusing on initiatives inspired by Matteo's story. Refugees found safety, impoverished communities received aid, and leaders came together to address global challenges. In a quiet moment, Trump and Barron stood on the balcony of their foundation's headquarters. Below, a crowd gathered to celebrate the progress they'd made. "You've come a long way, Dad," Barron said, pride evident in his voice. Trump nodded, his gaze distant. "I couldn't have done it without you. You reminded me of what really matters." As they embraced, the crowd below cheered, their voices a symphony of hope and unity. The world had changed, not because of one man, but because of a collective belief in the power of redemption. As the story of redemption comes to a close, I want to remind you that change starts with each of us. Let this story inspire you to reflect, to forgive, and to take action in your own life. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Let's start a conversation about the power of change and how we can all make the world a better place. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Together, we can spread hope and inspire others to believe in second chances. Thank you for being part of this journey.